Your eyes on the times, you walk ready to speak up. But with so many problems, you're exhausted trying to keep up.
This is the Church Politics Podcast, where you can get political commentary from a biblical worldview. We're not trying to be conservative or progressive. We're trying to be Christian in the public square.
And I'm black as heaven. I'm made in God's image. Nobody can change my settings. Amen. Got off my knees and put an end to my search. It's easy to sell your soul when you don't know what it's worth.
What you know, good and camp, you're listening to the And Campaign's Church Politics Podcast with Justin Giboney, a.k.a. Bishop Cooper's grandson. Oh, but I'm not alone. Once again, I'm here with Atlanta Mays High School's finest, Howard University's finest, and the man with the toughest 360 wave game in the Bible Belt, Dr. Jaha Howard. How you doing, brother?
Yeah, man, I'm doing all right. I'm doing pretty well. It's a busy day, election day for our special election. So it's a crazy one, but I'm excited to record with y'all.
That's right. It's an election night, and he decided as he's waiting for the votes to come in that he's going to come holler at us real quick. So we always appreciate that and are praying for you for sure. But it's not just me and Jaha. It's also the businessman extraordinaire, Atlanta Politico, the man with the toughest suit game in the greater Atlanta area, Cory Ruth. Cory, how you feeling, man?
Man, feeling great. Feeling really great. Praying for you, Jaha.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, feeling great, man.
Good stuff. Well, part of what we do here, and we say this every week, is critique. And critiques can come off as negative, but none of us are negative people. We're just analyzing the good and the bad. Well, one thing I wanted to start doing is to point out something good that's going on in culture or politics. And I'll be honest with you guys, I'm going to take kind of the low-hanging fruit, but I think it's such a big deal that it's worth mentioning. As everybody probably knows by now, the Epstein Files Transparency Act was passed through the House. I think there was only one person that voted against it in the House, and then was passed unanimously in the Senate, bipartisan. So I want to give a shout out to Representative Rokana, who's a Democrat, Representative Thomas Massey, who's a Republican, who would not take no for an answer. They came together, obviously in a bipartisan way, and said these files need to be released, number one, for the victims, and also so that we can have some accountability for the people who were involved with Epstein. And there were a lot of tricks pulled trying to keep this from coming out, a lot of delay games, all that stuff, and they did not stop. They waited it out, and they kept pushing. But also to the American people who also wouldn't take no for an answer, who made it very clear. I mean, for Senator Thune, who's the majority leader in the Senate, to pass that thing like the day it was passed in the House is crazy. He was not trying to get in the way of what was coming and the clear consensus that this needed to be released. I'm also going to give a shout out to the Republicans who said, man, it doesn't matter what the leadership says, this has to happen. And there's some people who did that before the wave even came, who actually created the wave. And so I appreciate that. And I think anybody who has criticisms of either party should be able to applaud people standing up and saying, no, this needs to get done. I'm not going to hide. I'm going to vote the right way. So everybody who did it for the right reasons, shout out to you. But I don't think we can deny that's a pretty good thing happening in politics today. Jaha, what you got, man?
And that's a great one, Justin. I'm going to mention something that happened today on Election Day. This is a special election, 4 Democrats, 1 independent, 1 Republican. I had yet to meet my Republican opponent, Josh Tolbert, and we were out both putting out some signs today. And we just end up having a great conversation about the Lord, a great conversation about issues. He's a listener to the Church Politics Podcast. So, I mean, in that moment, we had, even though we have very different political views on most things, we were able to kind of talk through, kind of our approach and have that common ground as folks that are trying to be salt and light here in the world. So just in a very small way, to have state Senate opponents meet on Election Day and have a 45-minute conversation right outside on a busy intersection, it was a beautiful moment. And I think it speaks to what can happen all over this country.
That's a real and campaign moment. I love to hear it, man. Two folks in the race that have been in contact and influenced by and campaign is great. Cory, what you got, man?
Nicki Minaj. She's partnering with
I
the
wasn't
Trump
expecting that one.
administration. Yeah,
Can we pause on Justin's face? For
yeah.
those that on YouTube, you gotta go and just get the clip of Justin's face when he said he was fine.
So, yeah, she's partnering with the State Department to raise awareness about, um, the persecution of Christians in Nigeria. And the State Department, as well as the United Nations, um, U.S. missions to the United Nations, excuse me. And so she was standing alongside Mike Walsh, who is the UN ambassador, and they made a joint statement today. And it all started with her on social media, and it just kind of coincided. But I think a lot of people, because the West is largely identifies as Christian, I think a lot of times when Christians are suffering persecution, be that in Nigeria, as is claimed here, or China, or wherever else, I think sometimes we forget the fact that we could be a persecuted religious minority, and there's Christians out there that don't have the freedoms that we have, and so
Yeah.
I thought that was I was just as shocked as you, to see that, but I thought that was a good thing that's happened.
Yeah, no, and that's an issue that we need to probably at some point discuss on this show, because it needs to be. We need to bring some exposure to it, because it's all bad. So thank you. That's a good one. I appreciate it. As always, I got to give a shout out to all our patrons and supporters for supporting us in what we do and how we do it. Look, you listen to this show because you see how bad it is in the public square. And you know that the AND campaign is committed to healing this through getting Christians to do better in the public square. And it's not going to happen by us just complaining about it. We've got to make a statement, and we got to get engaged. So, thank all of you who support our Patreon. So you can always go to patreon.com/churchpolitics if you want to support the Church Politics Podcast. And if you do that, say you give $10, $50 a month, you will get an extra episode every week. All right. Those are premium episodes, a little more intimate, me kind of going over some stuff that I'm thinking, sometimes a little more personally. So I appreciate everybody that's a part of that. Or you can go to the AND campaign, or go to andcampaign.org/donate, and you can give to the movement there. We want you to be a part of this. And for those of you who've already become a part of what we're doing, we greatly appreciate you. If you are watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. All right. So y'all know what it is. You've been here before. Grab your Bible, get your mind right, and prepare to think not like a Republican, not like a Democrat, but prepare to think like a Christian. Now, if Cory and Jaha don't mind, I'd like to start with scripture. Is that okay, guys?
Absolutely.
And I ask because, there are Christians who don't really like scripture. Like scripture that they don't agree with, they just kind of throw it out, especially when it comes from Paul. And this is Paul too. So anybody that doesn't like scripture, cover your ears, because we're going to always start with that. All right. So I got Romans chapter 5, verses 3-4. And it says, we also glorify in our suffering. We also glory in our suffering, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, character, and character, hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. All right. So we have perseverance in our suffering. We have character coming from perseverance, and we have hope coming from character. Guys, and this is my opinion, from ICE's handling of immigrants to January 6th and the pardoning of the rioters in January 6th, to the depiction of Haitian immigrants, to the corruption of pardoning the Binance founder, really to the expansion of executive power. In my humble opinion, there are many reasons to be seriously upset and concerned about Trump's presidency. It's no small issue. It's not something that we can look over and act as if it's not happening. However, I will say that a lot of my friends and family have taken their issues with Trump to what I see as an extreme in a very unhealthy place. And what I mean when I say that, guys, is obsessing over every trolling word that Trump says, losing sleep, losing friends, cutting off family members over Trump, pastors who mention Trump every single week from the pulpit. And what I want to say is, like, don't text me every day about Trump, something crazy about Trump. Like, I love you, but a lot of folks are just wilding out about what's all that is going on. And I even spoke to a group late last year, many of whom were like in tears in most of the conversation. Some of them even talking about, a return to slavery and all kinds of far out conspiracies. And it was disturbing. It was frightening. I'll be honest with you. Some people close to me, it can be disturbing how obsessed they are with what's going on. It's not that it's unimportant or not consequential or insignificant, but as a Christian, how far do we take that and putting us in a position where we're really being unhealthy? And initially, when I heard the term Trump Derangement Syndrome, I thought, okay, MAGA has created a term for people who just don't agree with everything that Trump says. But as time went on, I don't know that I would ever use that terminology, but I am becoming convinced that there is a serious issue that may be causing mental health problems for some people. Not just people who are against Trump, but even some people who support Trump. And so I ran into this article in the Wall Street Journal by Jonathan Alpert, who is a psychotherapist. And here's how it starts out. Here's what he says. Is Trump derangement syndrome real? No serious mental health professional would render such a partisan and derogatory diagnosis. Yet, I've seen it in my own psychotherapy practice. Patients across the political spectrum have brought Donald Trump into therapy not to discuss policy, but to process obsession, rage, and dread. Their distress is symptomatic, not ideological. Clinically, the presentation aligns with anxiety and obsessive compulsive disorders, persistent intrusive thoughts, emotional dysregulation, and impaired functioning. Patients describe sleepless nights, compulsive news checking, and physical agitation. Many confess they can't stop thinking about Donald Trump even when they try. They interpret his every move as a threat to democracy and to their own safety and control. Call it obsessive political preoccupation, an obsessive compulsive spectrum presentation in which a political figure becomes the focal point for intrusive thoughts, heightened arousal, and compulsive monitoring. Listen to this, guys. One patient, he says, told me that she couldn't enjoy a family vacation because it felt wrong to relax while Trump was still in office. Here's something else to keep in mind. A smaller group of Trump supporters have similar responses of opposite valence. They experience anger, feelings of persecution whenever Mr. Trump is criticized, as if an attack on him were an attack on them. In both cases, emotion replaces reason, and psychological distance collapses. This is an issue, and I want to just get you guys' thoughts on this article and the idea of Trump derangement syndrome. Cory, what does this bring to mind for you?
It brings to mind two things. That I remember this same sort of obsession on the other side, my side, when President Barack Obama was in office. I think because the media was largely supportive of President Obama, um, or at least not opposed to him, antagonistic to him. Maybe it wasn't fueled as much, but I remember folks on my side sort of being obsessed with Barack Obama in the same way that I see the left obsessed with, not just the left, even some mainstream Republicans obsessed with President Donald Trump, and in a way that I did not see when Biden was in office or when Bush was in office. And so there's definitely a heightened fixation on the president. There's definitely a sort of feeling of a loss of control. I like how he was using that. I mean, you hear people talking, and I'm like, well, you do know we're in a democracy. I mean, his power is checked against the powers of Congress and the powers of the courts, and so he is not sort of an elected monarch. And while he may be expanding the executive, even the expansion of the executive is checked. And so the sort of perspective that comes with having the balance of power and the perspective that comes with um, understanding the civics of American democracy are just gone. I mean, it's like everything that he says is dealt with as if it's done. And I'm like, well, let's see what happens because he's just saying this. We don't know if it's going to happen. And I'll just say this last thing. I got a text today, or I mean, a DM today with a video of Steve Bannon saying Donald Trump is going to run for a third term. And I told the person, this is old. And I sent them two interviews of Donald Trump saying he's not going to run and that the Constitution doesn't allow him to run and that he wants to just have a really strong 4 years. And they still text me back and was like, I don't agree with that. I think his lieutenants are out there telling us what he's going to actually do. I was like, well, look, I can't convince you of the strength of our democracy and our institutions to make sure that he only has two terms. And I also can't convince you about his intention not to run for a third term. I can't convince you of that. So
yeah, and I think we do have to admit, in a very irresponsible way, he flirts with it and trolls people with it, as does Bannon, and people see that. But I really think at some point this becomes a matter of emotional maturity and really spiritual maturity. Like at some point, we have to be able to see through the moment, and even if it was as bad as we said we think it could be, to say, what does that mean as a Christian when I know how this all ends? So that's part of it. The other thing I think people, even his worst critics, have to admit, not everything that everybody said was definitely coming true has come true, right? It doesn't look like the Supreme Court's going along with just any and everything he wants to do. They have some big decisions coming up here that I expect to probably disagree with. But still, that's very different than what we were presented. And I think if we're going to be honest brokers, we have to admit some of that. You can say it's bad, but to the extent that we allow it to kind of make us go overboard, I think that's an emotional and a faith and spiritual issue. Go ahead, Jaha. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think this illuminates a segment of our country that their identity is wrapped up in our politics. You know, whether it's who you're for or who you're against. And I love that Cory brought up the Obama. There's folks who were so obsessed with Obama that I think you can have this exact same conversation about Barack Obama. And I would argue that Obama isn't doing half the things to drive people crazy, but that's my perspective, not theirs. But I think it's about an identity thing. People's identity is wrapped up in politics so much, and essential figures are just occupying so much of the brain space that it's affecting a certain percentage of this population's ability to, move forward or to even process information. And I think we all know people like that in our circles, whatever side of the coin they're on. But it's very revealing. And again, this is about identity. This is about a lack of trust in institutions. We talk about that a lot because every flirting idea, any idea put out there, because our trust is so low, we're like, that can actually happen. Because so many things have actually happened. Gaza actually happened. Trump Riviera is like, oh, is that actually happening? Like, so these things that come up as ideas are floated. I think people are fair to be extremely skeptical, but there are central figures here, and right now is Donald Trump, and I think it's fair to respect it, know where it's coming from, and a lot of people don't have any other anchor but their politics.
And I would say that's love to hear what you guys hear about this. I would put some responsibility on the conflict entrepreneurs who are always kind of inflaming, always throwing gasoline on the fire, do you know that the people listening to you could, because of what you're doing, could really be having mental health issues? Do you care? Like, at what point do you say, hey, it's irresponsible for me to repeat or throw out every conspiracy theory or every negative thing that could happen? I remember when I was talking to the group that I mentioned, when I tried to say something hopeful, or when I tried to say, hey, this hasn't happened yet, let's not act like it already happened. It's almost like they didn't want it to hear it. They wanted it to be as bad as it could be because in some way it justified their narrative. They weren't looking for hope. They weren't looking for a word of encouragement. And in fact, they were rejecting it. And they were rejecting it as being just naive and all that. And I'm like,
Wow.
guys, this stuff hasn't happened yet. So what are your thoughts on the responsibility of leaders, influencers in the messages that they put out there? Cory, what are your thoughts on that?
I was just having a conversation today about the political model for Black leadership. And I was like, why is it every time a party puts forth a positive model of Black political leadership, is it followed by buffoonery? So you had Colin Powell and Condi Rice on the right, and we haven't seen a Colin Powell, Condi Rice since. And then you had Barack Obama on the left. He's followed by Jasmine Crockett. Like, how can a Jasmine Crockett exist in the shadow of a Barack Obama? And how can a Alan West exist in the shadow of a Colin Powell, Condi Rice? And you would think in a competitive environment, which politics is, that people would say, "Oh, that was successful. I'm going to mimic that." And it's just not the case, and it's very disheartening. And because we're elevating, we have a Wes Moore right now, and more people know Jasmine Crockett than Wes Moore. And part of that is, I think, as Black people, as Black leaders, is particularly those of us who have platforms, we got to elevate these folks. But to your point, I mean, Black folks aren't going to know about Wes Moore to the extent that they know about Jasmine Crockett if he's not being elevated across Black media. But they were, I mean, everybody's chasing clicks, everybody's chasing ratings,
Yeah,
and yeah,
we're looking for what's provocative. And the
yeah,
interesting thing about me, and I'm somebody who I think has fairly critiqued Jasmine Crockett. I don't know the sister. I don't have anything personal
yeah,
against her. But I do think she goes out of her way to be provocative. And what's interesting to me is a lot of people cheering her on hated when Trump did the same thing. And so it's almost like we feel that in order to defeat Trump, we have to come with the same rhetoric, the same, I'm trying to hurt your feelings, I'm going to tear you down, instead of the stately, dignified number of people. I mean, you could name a number of sisters in politics that do it the right way, a number of brothers in politics that do it the right way. We want what's provocative. We want somebody that's going to say something cutting in hopes that it hurts the other side. I think
yeah.
that's what we get out of it. But I think at the end of the day, that's really empty. Any thoughts just generally, Jaha?
Yeah, this is American culture. I mean, definitely American culture. We're very individualistic. We're very capitalistic. So what's making the money and what's elevating self is the provocative, and it finds its way in every racial culture, economic culture. We see that same thing, and I think with algorithms the way they are, it's easy to the echo chamber to be amplified, right? So you keep having the same thing. Instead of just being in a group that you signed up for, I'm in a liberal group or I'm in a conservative social media group. Now the group just is formed through the way what you click and what you watch and how much time you spend on each page, and it's right there for you. So you're gonna get what you pay attention to, and
Yeah.
this gets back to a spiritual conversation. It's our algorithms is revealing where our appetite is.
Mm,
So some of us have a way that we think of ourselves, but our algorithm is actually telling on ourselves.
yeah.
We think
And
of
it's
ourselves one way, but we're getting a lot of other information. It's because we like to look at it.
And it's interesting. I think you make some really good points. It's interesting that when Jasmine Crockett, and this is not all about her, I just think it's an important example. When she goes back and forth with Marjorie Greene Taylor, her comeback, which I think wasn't becoming of, neither of them were acting in a way that was becoming of being in Congress. That went viral before a policy, then, some policy proposal that somebody might have been putting up in regard to welfare or helping the poor. That stuff never goes viral, but we'll go viral because we like the Joan that she said against somebody else. That's to me, and the reason that I say something is not to beat anybody up, because some people automatically say, "Oh, you're trying to beat up on your own people." I'm about self-examination. I'm about holding up to a standard. And when I look at the civil rights generation, I look at their dignity. I look at how they handled themselves. I'm not just going to accept anything because this is what happens in the public square. Once you get criticized by the person that we really, really dislike, we love you. Whether you're right or wrong, once they criticize you, oh, you're ours, we'll protect you at all costs. And while there can be a level of protection, you're still held to a standard. And my worry is that on both sides of the aisle, we're not holding our own to a standard. And to me, from a biblical point of view, to hold somebody to a standard is love. It's not hatred. It's not condemnation. That's actually love if you do it in a compassionate way. So that's my point of view. Anything else to add, guys? All right.
I think you nailed it.
We'll be right back on the Church Politics Podcast.
Your eyes on the times, you walk ready to speak up. But with so many problems, you're exhausted trying to keep up.
This is the Church Politics Podcast, where you can get political commentary from a biblical worldview. We're not trying to be conservative or progressive. We're trying to be Christian in the public square.
And I'm black as heaven. I'm made in God's image. Nobody can change my settings. Amen. Got off my knees and put an end to my search. It's easy to sell your soul when you don't know what it's worth.
And we are back on the Church Politics Podcast. I don't think, we talked about this a little bit in the earlier part. I don't think anybody can deny, for better or worse, that Trump has had a profound impact on American conservatism. And one of my favorite economic thinkers is Michael Lind. He wrote a book called Hell to Pay: How the Suppression of Wages is Destroying America. It is well worth reading if you have not read it already. I think Michael Lind is one of those thinkers that needs to get more exposure because he's taking things seriously. He's someone that I think he would call himself a pluralist and think that we need to change kind of how we framed our economics and really how we engage one another. And he recently wrote an article in Unheard, which is a source that the AND campaign recommends just for its variety of viewpoints. And that was entitled "How Trump Remade Conservatism." And here's how he starts. He says, let me say this. The topic is generally about, is Trump a populist as he ran during the campaign, or is he more of an establishment Republican in the model of Reagan and Bush? Here's how he starts. Recently, a number of self-styled spokesmen for MAGA have claimed that the president has betrayed his populist base on issues ranging from foreign policy, with his bombing of Iran and threats of war against Venezuela, to higher education, with his insistence on admitting Chinese students to U.S. universities to maintain university enrollments and budgets. At the same time, old-fashioned conservatives complain that Trump has betrayed the legacy of Ronald Reagan and the two Bushes with his stances on trade and immigration. Both sides, Lynn says, are half right. This is an interesting question, and I want to start off, with the resident conservative, which is Cory. But let me help people understand when we talk about conservatism. Traditionally, there was just this, what they would call fusionist conservatism, which was basically the three legs of conservatism, which was economics, which would be basically kind of a free market libertarianism, right? The cutting of taxes, deregulation, things like that. Then you had foreign policy, which was foreign policy hawks, right? So which were people who saw kind of America as global police and really getting engaged in, issues outside of the country. And then you had on social issues, you had traditional values, marriage, and all those things, pro-life issues. Cory, from your perspective, how has Trump changed conservatism? Do you agree with Michael Lind? And has it been for better or for worse?
Actually, I think the the groundwork for this was sort of laid when George W. Bush ran. He ran as a compassionate conservative who would end nation building. And then September 11th happened. And he got into Iraq and Afghanistan and several other nations, and then also hit him having to run for reelection. He realized he got to rely on that standard coalition, Republican coalition, and so um, that got him looking a lot like Reagan conservatives and a lot like his father. I think Trump comes in and goes back to that sort of isolationist strand, which is except for the what happened, from Reagan to George W. Bush, the Republican Party has an isolationist strand. Like they rejected the League of Nations, for instance, and so for me, I think Trump going back to that um, is sort of where the party was kind of moving. I think the undercurrent of the Republican Party that people outside of the party might not be aware is libertarianism, and it is very, very strong uh, in terms of influence on Republican policy. Very strong ever since the Tea Party, where libertarianism, I mean, pretty much took over Republican thinking, and that happened during the first Bush administration. So that isolationism, very extreme small government stuff. Don't even want to spend money on highways. I mean, just pulling money. Defund the government essentially, and the federal government anyway. And so Donald Trump, I think, is pretty libertarian. And I also don't think that Donald Trump it has a systematic. I think Donald Trump, he's not looking for any of his stances to match or connect to another stance and build a systematic. I think Donald Trump is just taking every issue as it comes, and almost like you know probably how he does his business. And so I think that's the other thing. So this whole notion of like MAGA is connected around personality, is connected around culture, is connected around the principle of America first, not America alone, and not America only, but America first. And unlike what other movements were based on actual abortion, anti-abortion, or strong defense, or whatever else. It's not based on a set of policies. It's really just based on defiance against the mainstream and putting America ahead of globalization, essentially.
Has it been for better or for worse? What would be your take? You can take it by each leg of the stool.
Yeah, so I think for the legs of the stool, I wouldn't say it was better or worse. I would say that it's relevant for where we are today.
Man,
Now,
come on, bro.
I'm gonna
Give me
tell you
something
where.
more than that. The people of the Church Politics podcast audience demand a straightforward
No,
answer.
no, you got to get a straightforward answer. I think from a policy perspective, his set of policies broadly, his doctrines on foreign policy, his policies around taxation and tariffs and things of that nature is prescient for today. I think it's a new conservative economic that makes sense for now. I mean, you got to remember the
You like it
conservative.
though.
I like it. Yeah, conservative
Okay.
economics date back to the 60s, and liberal economics date back to the 30s. We need a new economic. Now, here's the part where I think is worse, and that is, you know, political political engagement, what we were talking about earlier. It's how we interact with each other and across the aisle. I think some of that has to do with just um, how um, fundamental his break from both Democrat and Republican doctrine has been in order to give us this new economic and this new foreign policy. But I also think it has a lot to do with just we're in a holy war right now between sides. I mean,
Yeah.
and I think that's creating this. But if there was a way to get that those set of policies that he brought, if they were in somebody that was less of a trigger, let's say, then I don't think we'd be having this discussion right now. I think all that is created and generated in terms of emotions and negative interactions is really what I'd like to see better.
Okay. Thank you for that. Jaha, I'm one of those people who I wasn't really in love with the old Republican Party. So when you look at the three-legged stool, I would say free market libertarianism, I'm actually in line with more so with Trump, what he ran on as more of a populist. I think populism is reactionary. So I don't call myself a populist, but I'm more in line with like put the middle class first, stuff like that. Don't be corporatist and all that. Foreign policy, although I don't like exactly his wording of it, I may be more in line with the way he goes about foreign policy than folks who want to get us in every war they see, have never seen a war they didn't like and didn't want to jump into, kind of like your Ted Cruz's and Lindsey Graham's. I don't connect with that. So a lot of folks who we may agree on not being Trump fans, if you want to go back to that, I can't go there with you.
Yeah.
The traditional values, I mean, obviously I have some conservative values. I don't necessarily agree how the moral majority went about a lot of that stuff. So for me, it's somewhat of a mixed bag because I don't necessarily want to go back to the old Republican Party, but I surely have issues with what's going on here. Where do you fit and how do you see his impact on conservatism relative to your views?
Yeah, I think it's crazy to even imagine Trump as conservative. Trump is just a once in a generation figure that is putting together pieces that work for him. And he doesn't fit any mold. He kind of found a way to push the right emotional buttons and connect folks that really don't really connect, but they connect with the idea of power. And I think that there's a deep issue going on here, and Trump represents a deep issue because he is representative of what a lot of Americans want to be. Just bold, fearless. That sounds great, but obnoxious. Ridiculously wealthy, doing what you want to do, powerful. It's almost an example of the worst of us in some regards, right? Nobody's all good or all bad, but Trump definitely is a symbol of, I think, a lot of the worst of America. So I don't even think it even fits into a conservative anything because he'll be a populist and pull on some traditional democratic values in a heartbeat if it's going to help, if he feels that way at the moment.
Yeah.
When it comes to foreign policy, I mean, it just depends on where you are. I mean, he's blowing up boats coming out of Venezuela, that with no justification. I mean, nothing. Just setting up a regime change at one end. You're continuing a apartheid genocide on across the world in Gaza and Israel. I'm not impressed with any of that. And
So would you prefer
you're going to mention you're going to mention some people who are probably worse in those particular areas, right?
No, listen. Would you prefer a Lindsey Graham or what you know of like a JD Vance? I'm just giving you two sides of and I think it's important to know because I don't know that a lot of people who aren't really paying attention see the split in the Republican Party. Trump is kind of holding it together, but the Lindsey Grahams aren't really with Trump. And then you have the JD Vances who have their own set of problems. I'm just trying to see how you see those.
I would actually prefer that somebody had a consistent policy that we can say, hey, they're going this way on all these different issues. I think Trump is all over the place and he will pivot in a heartbeat, and things that are sacred will be thrown out the window in a heartbeat if it means he can maintain power. So I just don't. So I would rather have somebody that's more at least consistent so you know what you're working with. He's so erratic that you don't know. So that way, even his suggestions, that's why people panic the way they do, because he could be joking, or he could be very, very serious. And that's just policy part. When it comes to like what is considered presidential, I mean, he's just disrespected the idea of presidential. I mean, now it's just we hear the word unprecedented all the time. I mean, that part bothers me tremendously, and I think it's done a social a lot of wrong into our social frame, our framework and our fabric in our country.
No, I think you make a good point in that it's hard to nail him down. I think there are some things that you can point out, whether it's trade policy, even some of the peace deals that have been done. I'm doing my best to reach out and be impartial to say there are some things that have been a clear mark of what he's trying to do.
Right.
And what I'm saying is, I would prefer somebody who's doing what he's doing with the trade deals, and somebody who is actually trying to stop wars. Then, even though I agree with some of the anti-Trump people, if they're closer to Lindsey Graham, I'm just like,
right. With the trade-off, you're substituting one.
It's a tough spot, right?
Yeah.
So,
I would say that some of what Jaha was saying, I agree with, and I think obviously I would state it differently, but I do agree that Donald Trump doesn't fit neatly in a conservative bucket. I think Donald Trump is our first modern independent president.
Which is that was the conclusion of the article, right?
Yeah.
Which was that he doesn't fit. Like he's
doesn't
both.
fit.
Yeah.
But I will say about in terms of he does what the stuff that he's doing does make sense, but the way that he does it clouds that for most people. And so, for instance, with the Venezuela thing, that maps to what he did in Panama, what he did in Mexico. He's trying to own the Western Hemisphere, and since the last 20 years, China and Russia have moved into Latin America very strongly.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, they were running essentially, they had more influence on the Panama Canal than we did. Now, could he have managed that in a way that, say, Obama or Romney would have managed it, and we probably wouldn't have had a problem with it? Because the way that he does it clouds that he has an agenda, manifest destiny, right, to take back the Western Hemisphere. And now, under the pretext of the war on drugs and bombing these vessels, really what he's doing is putting pressure on Maduro to come to the table and agree to kick China and Russia out and come and make the U.S. its economic and military partner so that he can start to build. And this also connects to what he just did in Argentina with the so-called bailout, which was really a currency swap. So a lot of the stuff that he's doing does make sense when the smoke clears. It's just he's doing it with such like almost a bull in a china shop that people can't see really how the dots are being connected. So,
and another good example is immigration. Whether you like immigration or not, whether you like enforcement or not, that's what the American people voted for. And so he did have, the stamp to go and do and enforce the law. It's the way, the chaos, the disorder, the lack of compassion, the inhumane way that he's going about it is the biggest problem. Because the American people voted for the rest. I mean, if you're going to be mad at them. It's looking like they're being very clear and saying this. We didn't vote for it this way, though, and we'll see how that shakes out.
But you have to say this, real quick. The way that we used to when we were in the '90s, kind of coming up, and movie X came out and stuff like that, we used to say no justice, no peace. And there is a tactic against Donald Trump where they're saying, hey, you're not going to get any peace. So like the ICE demonstrations and stuff, they're like, look, we're not going to let you go about your duties freely. We're going to make it difficult. So I'm not saying that.
But are you saying that it would look prettier? But I don't think he's trying to make it.
What I'm saying is if he's going, so if you're here illegally, this is the unspoken truth. If you're here illegally, or if you're undocumented, I went to jail for 2 days for being undocumented. So try to drive without your registration or proof of insurance and see what happens to you. If you're that way, you're in this country without permission, then you're on probation, essentially. So when you engage with the law in any way, you're going to be deported. Now, that's going back to Obama. So now, if Trump says, "Hey, I'm going to prioritize deporting people who have, criminal records, who are doing, bad things in our country," and he goes to get that guy, for instance, and the woman that's with him is also here illegally, even though she was living legally. Um, she's being deported too. Now, if you're on probation and the police come and get the guy that you're with, and that guy is illegal, you're going too. That's one of the terms of your probation, is that you're not going to be with anybody who is a criminal. And so but if I go to arrest that guy and a mob shows up of people and they're going to fall on the floor and lay limp and they're going to fight back and it's not going to be pretty. And
But before that was even that, what they're doing now was a response to the way that he was carrying this out. I think you're making it sound a lot cleaner than it was even in the beginning. It didn't become disorderly and chaotic, in my opinion, when the protesters came out. The protesters came out once that standard was already set by the administration. Are you saying that he's done it as cleanly as Obama did it? Because Obama deported a lot of people. I'm sure it wasn't all cute.
Sure.
But it seems to me that they are being purposefully doing this with I call a violent showmanship that just is below what the U.S. should be, how we should be engaging.
And we discussed this before. I do think there is a signal being sent that we don't want you here illegally. Just like the opposite was done, there was a signal being sent. Even while people were being deported under Obama, the signal was being sent that we're welcoming. And so, to me, I do think there is a symbol being sent. However, I don't know. There's too much smoke between people who are resisting law enforcement and whether or not law enforcement is executing, talking about ICE, executing their duties in a dignified way. I'm assuming they are. I don't know because how often does law enforcement have to deal with a mob that is going to resist arrest in an aggressive way? So we just don't know, and that plays very well for the cameras. And so this is what I'm saying when I say a holy war. That a lot of what Trump is doing is a holy war. We all knew Donald Trump before he ran for president. And I don't know, did any of us have like a real vehement problem with Donald Trump before he ran for president? He was on the shows, he was talking smoothly. I think what happens is, um, some of Trump's style is running into conflict with a lot of the sort of aggressive protest culture on the left, whether that's protesting using your role as a journalist to protest. I mean, you see what the BBC just did. Now imagine you being in that situation. And I was on Carly Fiorina's campaign when this was done to her.
I remember that.
In our campaign, we was behind the scenes trying to figure out a way just for her to get her message across. They totally gaslit the American people about what Carly Fiorina was saying. And it had an effect on her. Like she started going into interviews with a little bit of an edge. And so it has an effect. And if you're a Republican and you run for office, you know this, not to the extent that Donald Trump does. And I'm not trying to absolve Donald Trump of his tactics. What I'm trying to say is you cannot critique those tactics without also taking into consideration the holy war that he is in. There's nothing that Donald Trump can do that he's not going to receive all of war. It's not like they're prioritizing what they're challenging him on. It's everything. And this is how he's responding.
All right. Jaha?
Yeah, I do appreciate it. I'm trying to listen. I appreciate you humanizing our president, which he is a human, and we should respect everyone made in the image of God. But I think it also just makes it seem like he means really, really well, and he's not out here, benefiting personally between he and his family and all the different things. I mean, the laundry. I mean, he has earned the critique. He has earned the protest. He has earned it 10 times over. And it's so much that it gets snowballed that I think we even forget how wild of a time that we're living in.
Can two things be true? Can it be true,
I
which
think
I agree? Hold up. Can it be true that he has earned a lot of this, and I agree with you on that, and also
very
that
much.
the media has been biased and partial?
Very much. Media has been very biased. And I think all of us, if we were Trump, we would probably go in different, ready to fight. Like, who wants to just get hit in the face every time? He has come back this second term with a plan, and based on how he was treated by insiders, on the first time around. So it's effective. It's just effective in in a lot of ways that I'm not happy with in so many people around the country. But yeah, I just think our norms matter, and I know our trust in institutions are so low, but I feel like we are in a place where everything's got thrown out the window, and everyone's just kind of fending for themselves. And Donald Trump is the example of, hey, at the end of the day, do what you got to do, find your way. If you're powerful enough, you'll get away with it.
All right.
Maybe get a pardon, maybe get celebrated at the end of the day.
There you go. We'll be right back on the Church Politics Podcast.
Your eyes on the times, you walk ready to speak up, but with so many problems, you're exhausted trying to keep up.
This is the Church Politics Podcast, where you can get political commentary from a biblical worldview. We're not trying to be conservative or progressive. We're trying to be Christian in the public square.
And I'm black as heaven. I'm made in God's image. Nobody can change my settings. Amen. Got off my knees and put an end to my search. It's easy to sell your soul when you don't know what it's worth.
And it's Justin Giboney, a.k.a. Bishop Cooper's grandson, and I'm back with Dr. Jaha Howard and Cory Ruth. And I want to talk about, every now and then they have these little, these little surveys you can take, and it kind of tells you where you fit in on the ideological map, like what your tribe is. And I saw one of those. I think it was Matt Iglesias who shared the link to it, and we'll actually put the link in the show notes if you guys want to try it. But it kind of put people in different little political tribes. What is your tribe based on some of the answers that you gave? Now, I'm going to be honest. I think it was, I think it gives you an idea of where you may be, but some of the questions were hard to answer. And so not everything is going to be accurate, and I'll show you what you mean. So my political tribe was middle American optimists. And these are middle of the road people who are middle of the road on most issues. Now, one thing that they said, mostly pro-choice. I'm obviously not pro-choice. And optimistic about the ability to get ahead through hard work. All right. They also put me in the quadrant that said I was a populist. You combine socially conservative views, that's true, with economically liberal positions, supporting economic intervention while holding traditional values. Fair enough. Like I said, I think populism is reactionary. And so I'm more like closer to like what Michael Lynn would call a pluralist, but I'll take it. And then last would be they placed me in the Labor Party, which is putting the middle class first, focusing in on healthcare, labor unions, things of that nature. So, close as people like us are probably going to get. Jaha, tell me where they placed you and what they got right and what they might have got wrong.
Yeah, it was. I agree. There's some challenges with the questions, but I'm in the electability Democrats political tribe, but my quadrant is slightly conservative, and then my party would be the Labor Party.
I was in the same party. All right.
Yeah. So, but like when I noticed where I was on their quadrant, I'm really in the middle. Like I feel like if I answered a couple questions on a different day, I can hop around. And all four of those quadrants. That's how, I don't know. I can tell my views on each thing. I take each view as it is, each issue. And I guess it's true. I don't fit squishy in anybody's category, right? So,
okay.
Where did you guys find what party you're in?
So it gave you three things. At the top of it was it says your political ideology. Then it says your tribe. Under your tribe, it says your quadrant. and then your party in a multi-party America. So this was hypothetically, if there was a multi-party America, that's where you would fit.
That's a good.
If you can't see yours, just tell us what what you got initially.
So my political tribe was moderate right, and my quadrant was conservative, and I was in the upper right quadrant, socially and economically conservative. Like you, they did get one thing wrong, and I was like, wait, I specifically chose against that, but they put that in there anyway. So, but anyway, I feel like it's about right for me. I always say that I'm a conservative liberal. So I am conservative, but I come to conservatism like a liberal. So I'm open
Traditional
to
classic
everything,
liberal.
and I'm open to everything, and I'm gonna evaluate everything fairly. And I don't have a problem, sort of changing my view on something if I see that it's wrong or times have changed. But with that openness, I felt like the right makes more sense for me. So being a moderate right makes a lot of sense. So.
Let me ask you, what is generally your stance on labor unions?
I think labor unions should be a conservative um, stance. Like, so what we're talking about, a free market, right? So part of that market is the people, the laborers.
Yeah.
So for me, I never understood why that was an issue of the left. So I think Donald Trump's stance on that actually, not that I think he
But
was thinking ideologically, but I think that makes the right
so
sense.
isn't the invisible hand of the market enough? We don't need. Some conservatives would say, "I'll say it's not my stance." We wouldn't need labor unions because the invisible hand of the market will,
But that's
make
part of the
sure that
market. See,
wages are where they want to be.
that's a misunderstanding of Adam Smith. So the invisible hand of the market is every component, every stakeholder in the market playing a game.
Mm.
So let's go back to slavery. The free market, the invisible hand of the market, should have ended slavery. We shouldn't have had to go to war. Poor whites should have protested at the ports and said, "You're not bringing another free black body here to do work that we can do for a wage." But that didn't happen. So what happened is they were able to mute that aspect of the market.
Mm.
And so the same thing, I think there's players that try to mute labor. And so in this case, somebody interpreted labor unions to be not to be part of the market. That is part of the market. I'm participating when I am in labor. That's how you determine pricing. Labor is the key component to determining pricing. And so to me, if you remove labor from the equation, you don't have an economy.
So you're telling me that the invisible hand of the market isn't the Holy Spirit? That's what I tend to get from some market fundamentalists, that the
No.
invisible hand of the market will fix it all.
That's good. No, it's not indeed.
Anything else, guys?
That's a really good point. I appreciate you highlighting about labor. Like that's such a huge part. It affects the market, but it is discussed in a lot of business corners as if that's not part of it.
It's
So
not part of the market. Like, that's the most
I appreciate
bizarre.
you articulating that in a way that was just really, really clear.
Yeah, that's the most bizarre analysis of capitalism I've ever heard. In addition to that,
We're just
this is why
self-interested, right? I mean, it serves its purpose.
Say it again.
I said, or just self-interested. It serves the purpose of just trying to xing labor out, and so you can get what you want and have the advantage.
Well, we need labor to wake up now and deal with AI and deal with robotics and say, hey, do we need to have Waymo driving all over the city? I understand late nights. I understand where there's low capacity, but like, do we need to be replacing 20,000 Uber drivers?
And this is where this is a whole nother subject, but I'm gonna leave it here. We'll end here. This is where we really need to touch on this, because everyday people can either look at others and say, hey, what are you going to do about IA? Or we can say no.
Yeah.
We can say there's certain stuff I'm not going to get into. I'm just going to call it Uber. I'm not getting into a car that doesn't have a driver. I'm not accepting certain services unless there's somebody working. We can do that. We don't just have to wait on politicians to do it.
Yep.
We can do it. And that's another conversation that we got to get to. Always enjoy you guys, man. Thankful for another conversation. It looks like our dear friend Jaha Howard has come in first and that he's going into a runoff. So y'all pray for our brother, man. He had a very good showing, and I think he's going to make it happen in this runoff, man. So appreciate you guys always.
Coming in real time, but so far so good. And, we're going to keep at it. So I appreciate y'all. Thanks for your prayer.
And Cam, you know what it is. There's a cross that neither political conservatism nor progressivism is fit to bear. There's a civic hearing in need of faithful witnesses who love social justice and won't surrender the truth to be loved by the world. Politic with the boldness and compassion of Jesus Christ. Until next time, Ann Camp. We'll holla at you.
Your eyes on the times, you walk ready to speak up. But with so many problems, you're exhausted trying to keep up.
This is the Church Politics Podcast, where you can get political commentary from a biblical worldview. We're not trying to be conservative or progressive. We're trying to be Christian in the public square.
And I'm black as heaven. I'm made in God's image. Nobody can change my settings. Amen. Got off my knees and put an end to my search. It's easy to sell your soul when you don't know what it's worth.